Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to be talking about my new song, Riding the Storm. This song is out now on Spotify, Apple Music, streaming, all those other places. There is a music video here on my YouTube channel, and just last week I put out a performance video which you can watch up here, maybe after this video, or if you've not heard the song, probably best to listen to it first there and then come back here, because in this video I'm going to be doing a breakdown of the production session of the song. But before we get into that, I want to give you a little bit of context for why I wrote this song. In 2021, I was composer and sound designer for a production of The Tempest. I still have my script, and this song was written as the part of the opening sequence. At the start of The Tempest, there is a shipwreck, there's a big storm, and then a shipwreck. And this song, Riding the Storm, is basically the heavy metal soundtrack to that massive raging storm. There's a little bit of magic going on, a little bit of magical trickery alongside that. So this song kind of scored that opening storm. So to get that kind of effect, I was playing with some distorted, drop-tuned guitars, and I put together basically various sections of a song, and in the theatre I would trigger different sections to play or to transition between different parts of the song depending on what was happening on stage. But to get this song ready to release, I reworked each of those sections and strung them together in a specific order, and I wrote some new sections. I re-recorded everything, so I re-recorded all the guitar, all the bass, reprogrammed all the drums, basically recreated the whole thing from scratch using the original version as kind of like a sketch for compositional ideas. To take the track to the next level, I included a solo section, and I asked a friend of mine, Owen Elliott, to record a solo for this track. Owen is an immensely talented guitarist, and we've worked on things together. A few years ago, we made a heavy metal song out of a dog sound. Check that one out. But Owen is an immensely talented heavy metal and immensely talented classical guitarist as well. He plays in a band called Axiomatic Theory with two 8-string electric guitars and drums, so definitely check them out. They're an awesome band based here in Canberra. Owen's an amazing guitarist, and I wanted to bring this track to the next level, and I knew one of the best ways to do that was to ask Owen to play a solo, and he absolutely did not let me down. We're going to get in detail into Owen's solo a little later in this video, but for now, let's jump over to the production session and take a look. So here is my session in Ableton Live. There's a lot going on here, obviously, but let's take a look at the very beginning. You can hear here a bunch of guitars tuning up. What's going on here? Well, basically, at the start of the play, one of the things our director wanted was this effect of like an orchestra tuning up at the start of a concert. But instead of an orchestra, we had a soundtrack mainly of electric guitars. So that's what we started the play with. And to kind of recreate that, I've included that here. This obviously isn't included in the Riding the Storm track, but it is the opening track of an upcoming album, which Riding the Storm is a part of. So there's more going on. You just have to wait and see what that is. But you can hear this at the start of the music video of Riding the Storm as well. One of the interesting things that I did with this track was, instead of just using one drum kit, I used 2 drum kits. This is something I did first on a video about a year ago, I think. Probably a little bit more, called June Double Drum Jam. That's linked up there. In that video, I used 2 drum kits as kind of an experiment, and I liked the sound of it. And I've seen people use 2 drummers in lots of different contexts musically before, so I thought it might be fun to do that myself. A little bit easier to make things work when you have programmed drums, so I gave it a try. This is what that kind of double drum sound sounds like here in this track. Let's drop it at section D. To get this to work and make sure each drum kit sounds distinct, one is mostly panned to the left and one is mostly panned to the right. But because drum kits usually sound relatively in the center, or at least with these Get Good drum libraries that I am using, they have already panned various kit elements to different spaces. I have basically used a stereo rack here which pans different things different amounts. So we can see here the room, the overheads and the toms are panned the left hand side all the way to the left and then the right hand side in the middle. So what that basically means is that it adds up to the drum kit being kind of slightly to the left. But the snare is a little bit more in the center and the kick is even more in the center. Because that low end of the kick you usually want to be right in the middle, the kick drums, both this one here on the left and this one here on the right, are slightly more central than the other drum kit elements. And that basically just means that, one, there's a fuller stereo picture for these drums, but also so that the kick drum isn't kind of existing in both ears at once, it's kind of more in the middle, just because of the thumpy, low-end nature of the kick. That's what I found worked best to make it sound clear, but still distinct. You can still hear both kicks going off against each other. You can hear both drum parts are not exactly identical. They're playing slightly different, but a lot of the time they're playing similar patterns or locking in with specific things, especially in the kick drum, to get that unified kick sound. Because the attack of a drum kit is so fast, if drum kit elements are slightly out of time with each other, you can get a flamming effect, which doesn't sound all that great. This is why dual drum kit setups with program drums work great, because you have exact fine control over the MIDI. So when you want things to be exactly in time, they are. And if you want things to be slightly more humanized and slightly separated in time, we can do that as well. Let's take a listen to this section here where you'll hear different elements playing off each other. You'll hear sometimes one drum kit might hit a cymbal or a tom, the other drum kit might not. But things like the kick and snare tend to be mostly entirely in time. You can hear that especially in the fill at the end there. There's both drum kits back to back. You hear they play different parts there. You can also hear it in this section where one drum kit is playing extra fast kicks or triplet pattern on the kicks and the other part is not. So together they play off each other like this. That's the kind of exciting drum interplay that you can get when you're working with two kicks. If you want to hear a little bit more about how I process and work with drums, I talk a little bit more about it in this video over here. But for now, let's move on to bass. This is the bass track here. Alright, so for the bass tone, I'm actually using Neural DSP's Archetype Tim Henson, which is not designed for bass, but I found I got a really great grungy bass tone by tweaking some of the things here. I probably started with a preset and then did some tweaking, but we're working here with this Angel amp or Cherub amp, I think it's called. The bass turned up, the mids turned up a bit, and the treble turned down. Bit of presence, bit of level, bit of gain. And then over here in the pedals, you see just a bit of compression before it's running into the amp. This is a sound that I found I really liked how it worked with bass, especially in this context. Maintained a lot of low end, but still gives it a bit of punch and drive. And in particular, it has a really nice translation of the sound of the fingers hitting the strings, which I really wanted to cut through on this track. So we get a bit of that with this plugin for tone. Then there's a bit of EQ rolling off the very low end of the bass here. Bit of utility to turn it down, it's probably a bit loud, and then a couple of compressors just to bring up a little bit more low end here, and then to give it a little bit more punch. And then another EQ at the end just to really tame some of that deep low end and to make sure that the high end isn't competing with the guitars. And then at the very end, just a utility to make sure it's in mono. I always want my bass track to be in mono, or I usually want my bass track to be in mono, especially in a metal context where the rhythm guitars are already panned left and right, and in this context where the drums are also panned left and right, it was kind of important to make sure that there was a really solid mono bass. A really solid mono bass, B-A-S-E, which came from the bass, B-A-S-S. This bass is my Ibanez EBH 5-string to get that nice low D and C in this song. Let's jump over now to the rhythm guitars. So as I said, there's obviously a left and right panned rhythm guitar tracks, but in this track, there is also an extra rhythm guitar track. I played in different sections of the song, so you can see not the whole song, but in certain parts of the song, I played a third rhythm guitar track up an octave from the low guitar. So the low guitars are playing in C standard, so they're playing deep down mostly to that low D. This rhythm guitar part is playing just in the regular guitar range. Let's take a quick listen. That's just to give the rhythm guitar a little bit more cut, to cut through the mix. To get the tone for this, you can see the EQ rolling off the low end and a little bit of the high end. So again, it's not too gnarly. It's just a bit of cut in the upper mid-range. The tone's coming from, again, Archetype Tim Henson, using this almost modern metal preset. It's probably, I don't know which one that's from, but we can see we've got a bit of boost, bit of compression, using the lead amp, some cabs, no multi-voicer, and then a bit of EQ rolling off the low end. That's something I like to do a lot of the time with the EQ on rhythm guitar parts, especially when there's bass, roll off the low end so it's really not competing with that bass guitar. One of the things that I've done a few times in this track, and we'll see it here for the first time, is I've automated some overdrive. So if we see the automation here of this overdrive, basically what's happening is the overdrive from Archetype Tim Henson is turned off, but then at this specific point in the song, the automation arm goes up here, and then the overdrive is turned on. So we can see that for the second half of the song, the overdrive is on, and that's controlled here with this automation here in this rack. There's another effect going on here, and that is that subtle stereo effect, which, as the name suggests, is kind of subtly panning this track slightly back and forth in the stereo space, just to give a bit of extra width. You can see that's not happening in the tune-up section, but it is happening here in the middle. Let's take another listen, and if you're on headphones or stereo speakers or something like that, you'll hear it panning around a little bit in the stereo space. But let's get into those heavy, low-tuned rhythm guitars. That's probably what we're all here for, right? Why are you here? Hopefully you're enjoying this video. Like the video if you're enjoying the video. That'd be great. So, as I said, two rhythm guitars, left and right. You can see there's two tracks for each. That was just because in some sections there was a little bit of overlap between each part. So transitioning from one section to the other, the end of one section overlaps with the start of the next. So there's two versions of each rhythm guitar track, but they're identical in terms of how they're processed. The right track is going through Archetype Corey Wong for the tones. Not what you'd expect from heavy metal, especially when I own Archetype Tim Henson. But I find that I can get some really nice heavy tones out of Archetype Corey Wong as well. It's meant for clean tones, but does heavy really well. So there's a bit of compression. Obviously the overdrive, fairly high on the drive, going into the tube amp. Bit less bass, a bit more mids, bit more treble. Master cranked all the way, just to kind of drive it. And then bit of low end roll down as usual. But this track is doing a similar thing where the tuba, that tube screamer pedal, is off at the beginning of the track, and then when it gets to a certain point, it turns on. You can see that here with that automation arm. So for this section of the track and for the very end of the track, there you can see it there, the distortion is turned on, or that extra layer of distortion, overdrive, is turned on. For the left guitar, the tones are coming also from Archetype Tim Henson. This is the Vintage Rhythm preset. And you can see as well, similar thing going on where in the second half of the song, that overdrive is getting turned on. As I said before, the rhythm guitars are panned, hard panned left and right. If we take a look here, hard left on the left track, except in the solo section where it comes a little bit more to the middle. And same for the right-hand side. Hard, right, but then in the solo section, this left-hand side is panning slightly to the middle. This is my true stereo rack. Basically what it does is you have independent panning control over the left-hand and the right-hand side of a stereo channel. Kind of gives you a little bit more fine control over your stereo panning. But basically what this is doing is that for most of the song, the guitars are hard panned left and right. The rhythm guitars are hard panned left and right. In the solo section, they come a little bit more in the middle, and we'll talk about why in a second. See, I give you reasons to stay and watch the whole video. I don't give you everything straight away. I'll tell you why a little bit later. Next, let's talk about the lead guitar. So there are two lead guitar parts, and that's because one is this lower part, playing in the upper mid-range, and the other part is much higher, playing in the high register of the guitar. Now you can hear there a little bit of subtle panning. What's going on there? Well, one of the cool things with these two leads is that they are hard panned or softly panned left and right, but then they kind of swap over. So if we take a listen to where this comes in, so this lead guitar, the lower one, starts slightly to the left and then it transitions slightly to the right. While if we look at lead 2, it does the opposite. So they swap back and forth. Before that second higher lead part comes in, the regular lead has this same subtle stereo effect. So it's kind of slightly panning around. So there's always a bit of stereo effect going on with the lead guitars, and most parts in this song, you can hear the drums, the rhythm guitar, the lead guitar is, all these parts are doing stereo panning, which is why I said that was really important that the bass was mono. Just because there's all this other stereo stuff happening. But these two lead parts are going back and forth. I think both of them are getting, this one's warm lead preset that I've tweaked a little bit from Corey Wong. So the main lead is going through Archetype Corey Wong, and the other lead is going through a vintage lead preset from Archetype Tim Henson. This higher lead part has this Henson parallel verb setup, which is basically an effect track that I've created using Archetype Tim Henson. It's just the just a little bit of EQ and the chorus and reverb. So it's basically just a parallel reverb chain. We've got the Henson verb and the dry, which basically means that there's a dry signal going through and also a 100% reverb channel. If we look here at the verb volume, that is kind of going up a little bit here at the transition out of the solo and into the final section, and then it's turned off. And then we have all this panning stuff at the end, as well as some EQ. Now there's some specific EQ and gain automation around the solo section, because the high lead guitar, I didn't want my lead guitar part, which was acting as a backing role in the solo section, to compete with Owen's solo. So let's now go take a look at Owen's solo and see what's going on in this solo section that I feel like I've talked about so many times. Let's jump in and take a look. So first of all, one of the things you might notice is that there are two solo parts. I have solo right and solo left. That's right. The lead guitar, the rhythm guitar, the drums are all stereo band, as well as the solo. This is why, call back to what I said before, this is why the rhythm guitars in the solo section are panned a little bit more central, because there's already solo parts going stereo, so I didn't want everything to be 100% stereo in the solo section. So that's why the rhythm guitars go a little bit more to the middle. But yes, we have a solo right and a solo left. 2 parts. Well, one of the reasons I wanted 2 parts is because I did a little bit of retiming here at the start of the solo. This is Owen's original solo. This is what he recorded. It sounded like this. Which in context sounds like this. Very cool, but I wanted to fill a little bit more of the space between the other instruments cutting out and the start of the solo section. So I added in this other guitar part, and the two of them kind of play off each other with a bit of retiming. Almost like an echo effect. But to achieve that, I have created a copy of Owen's solo and then basically copy-pasted the first half of the solo back a beat and then done a little bit of a transition so that then it ends up being at this, synchronized by the time we hit beat 4 of this first bar. So let's take a listen to that again. So you see the 2 parts start at different times and then join back together in unison. Now, you may have noticed from these names of the files, we've got Riding the Storm, solo tone, and solo DI. So the solo tone is Owen's own tone that he set up and sent to me. I'm not sure exactly what he uses to get his tone. If you want to know, go and leave a comment on an axiomatic theory video and maybe Owen will get back to you. But this is Owen's tone that he sent me. I really like the sound of it. I think it sounded great. So I left that as is. But for the other channel, to make them sound slightly tonally differently, I reamped the DI, which Owen also sent to me. So Owen's DI is going through Archetype Tim Henson. I've used this legato neck shred playlist, because that's a little bit, not playlist, preset, legato neck shred preset, because that's the kind of playing that Owen is doing here. We can say boost up, compression up, overdrive up. We're using the lead amp, obviously, with a lot of bass, it seems. Bit of treble, bit of mid, going through these cabs. Pretty much flat EQ with a few tweaks to stop the high end from getting too intense. And then chorus, delay, and reverb. But I've also done a lot of automation on this channel. You can see here I've put Archetype Tim Henson into this rack, and there's a bunch of red dots here, which means that there are a lot of parameters changing. So let's take a look at each of those in turn. So first of all, we have this reverb, a bit of reverb between this first half of the solo and the second half of the solo, so the reverb gets a bit stronger. Probably just to fill in that gap between one phrase and the other, bit of reverb to fill in that space. A bit of delay going up here to do the same in that same section. But the main thing the delay is doing is at the very end of the solo, there's this big echo at the end. You can hear this delay track scooping up really high to get a big long delay, big long echo at the end. Then there's some modulation going on with the multi-voicer. When Owen sent his solo originally, in the second half of the solo, he opened with this line. Let's take a quick listen. A lot of the same note in a row, which I like the sound of it, but I also heard some harmony stuff going on. Later on in Owen's solo, he already plays some harmony stuff on the guitar. Take a listen. he's already playing some harmonized lines in his solo. So I thought what would be cool is in the doubled track, if I added some harmony using the multi-voicer in Archetype Tim Henson. Archetype Tim Henson has this great multi-voicer where you can basically add retuned double parts of the guitar that kind of get auto-tuned to different pitches. And basically what I've done is, you can see here, it's jumping around a lot because I have a little melody being played. Let's take a listen to that. And again with that full part. So I have a doubled part auto-tuned alongside the original, moving up and down to create this moving harmony. With both solo parts together, that sounds like this. So it's just combining and exaggerating some things that Owen is already doing in his solo. He's already playing some harmonized parts later on, so I thought it'd be cool to add a little bit of extra harmony using some cool effects in Archetype Tim Henson to achieve that. I had also already done this retiming at the start of the solo, so it's already established that the two parts are playing together but slightly independent, so this just revisits that later on in the solo. Gives the solo, I think, a nice cool arc. One of the things you might have noticed in this solo bracket is that there are a few other things. There's an organ, there's a synth, and there's a toy piano. So let's take a look at those. The organ I brought in just to double this harmonized part. Owen, as I said, plays this harmonized melody in his solo. Super impressive how he does it. But I thought it was cool. It kind of had a Baroque sound, so I thought an organ would be cool to kind of bring out that harmony. Just gives it a little bit of a churchy, kind of classical music-y feel, which is already a style that Owen kind of plays in. So it's just bringing that Baroque style out a little bit more. You can see the organ patch that I'm using is actually called Organ Buck to Basics. So definitely in that Baroque kind of style. I also included some synth and toy piano to give that harmony even more cut through. And these two patches here, the toy piano and the aerial synth, are both patches that I used a lot throughout my Tempest soundtrack. So it was cool to kind of bring them into this context where they weren't originally in the show, but now creating full album, I can bring together some of the elements and create a more cohesive picture. Also, in this scene, it's kind of implied that Ariel is manipulating the people on the boat. So we use this aerial synth and this toy piano, which were associated with that character in the play, to kind of bring that moment of the story into this track. Here's what those extra parts, the organ, the aerial synth, and the toy piano all sound like together. At the transition point between the first half and the second half of the solo, I also use these for just a little swelling arpeggio. Let's hear all of those things together from the start of the solo all the way through to the end, so you can hear all of those effects and added layers coming in. And let's take a listen to that with the whole band and really appreciate all that Owen adds to this amazing track. Awesome solo from Owen. If you want to watch Owen actually play that solo, check out that performance video that I put out last week. You can watch Owen play a solo. He plays it like it's the easiest thing in the world. He makes it look so easy to play while he's playing these crazy tapping lines. It's amazing. Thank you, Owen, for blessing this track with your amazing playing. One of the things that you might have noticed coming out of that section is that the toy piano kind of continues and it plays the rhythm guitar line. After adding that toy piano for emphasis in Owen's solo, I thought it was a really cool texture, that toy piano on top of the distorted electric guitars. So I thought, why not have it carry through into the end to kind of add an extra layer to this final conclusion, to kind of make it a more dramatic conclusion, and also to, as I said, bring in those other elements of the play just a little bit more. Very subtle, but you don't want it to be overpowering. You don't want it to be too harsh in that high end. Toy piano is a tough instrument to mix, but just a little bit of extra spice on there. Very cool, I think. To give some even more punch to this final section, I have a few other things going on. As well as doubling that rhythm guitar part in the toy piano, I also have this sax synth, which you can see is a very complicated effect rack that I've put together, but basically it's taking this sample, let's take a listen, which is from Moonhooch and Andrew Huang's collab. It's just one note on a very low tuned sax. I think it's on like a bass sax. Yeah, bass stab. A bass sax or a contrabass sax or something like that. It's just one sample that I've turned into this instrument, which basically can play that one note at a bunch of different pitches. And that is doubling the bass line to give the bass a little bit of extra punch. You can hear, sounds kind of weird, but in the full context of the track, it sounds like this. Very subtle sound, but I find it gave the bass just a bit of extra punch here for this final conclusion. With some other final sound effects, we have these slap hits, which again are doubling the bass line. Or just specific notes in the bass line, just to give them a little bit of extra crack. Again, a very subtle effect, but it just gives a little bit of extra punch. And the last final effect layer is this little slap effect here. Just like a clap or a big echo. Kind of acts almost like just a big crash or a wash, or like in electronic music when they use white noise to kind of whoosh, whoosh, whoosh over a section. You know what I mean. It's kind of doing that, but with a bit of extra emphasis. And then I use a similar thing going into the solo section as well. And then in the middle of the solo section as well. So, that's the full track. Riding the Storm. Thanks for watching this video. A little bit about the production, the behind the scenes of this track, Riding the Storm. If you want a detailed video on the mixing process of this track, drop a comment below. Maybe I'll do a mix breakdown as well as just the production side of things. But that's it for now. Hopefully you enjoyed having a bit of insight into this track, how it came together, some of the composition, arrangement elements, as well as production, guitar tones, that kind of thing. As I said, thank you to Owen Elliott, amazing guitarist, played an amazing solo in this track. Definitely check out Owen's work with Axiomatic Theory. If you like this track, their music is even more intense and wicked, and Owen does even more crazy awesome stuff. So definitely check out Axiomatic Theory. If you liked this track and you haven't already seen the music video and the performance video, definitely go watch those. And if you want more of this kind of Tempest heavy metal stuff with awesomely talented soloist features from amazing talented guests, then stick around. Subscribe to the channel, because I'll announce it. I'll say it here. On the 8th of December, I have a new song coming out, and there will be a video for that here on the 8th of December. So subscribe to see that when it comes out. Watch one of the videos on the screen if you like this video. Maybe you'll like one of those. And subscribe if you're interested in this kind of content. Like the video if you like the video. Leave a comment. Do all of that stuff. And I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.